Is starting business in Australia good? When we mention Australia, what is the first thing that comes in mind? Sydney Opera House, or maybe the recent discovery of oil, or perhaps kangaroos. However, if you take a deep look into the beautiful continent, you might discover much surprise. One of their main businesses is mining, followed up by tourism, and of course agriculture. Before we talk about starting a business in Australia, we will go over Australia as a whole. First, its history, then current political system and legal issues. Australia is the 6th largest country in the world with 23 million people living. 23 million. Anyways, back to history. The first kind of Australian people were Aboriginal Australians and are believed to have first arrived on the Australian mainland by sea from Southeast Asia between 40,000 and 70,000 years ago. The artistic, musical, and spiritual traditions they established are still living traditions in human history. Australia became a federation in 1901, and Edmund Barton became the first Prime Minister of Australia. During the same year, Australia first became a federation and started building and gaining control over government agencies such as the High Court and the Army. In 1902, the Franchise Act guaranteed women the right to vote in federation elections. The politics of Australia takes place within the framework of a federal parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy. Australians elect leaders to the Federal Parliament of Australia, a bicameral body which uses fused executive originally from the Westminster system, and a Senate adopted from the United States Congress. There are two recent legal issues in Australia. First, there are plans by the federal government to put national internet filter on Australia. It would be similar to China, where our internet will be monitored and certain sites will be blocked from access. Second, there are issues with banning of all video games rated R. Games such as Left 4 Dead 2 have been modified. But leaving these issues, we will go into cultural effects on doing business. The business culture of Australia has some interesting facts and rules that foreign businessmen should keep in mind before going on business trip to Australia. First, Australians consider business seriously, and being on time for meetings are very strict. They also respect individual privacy, so they don't tend to build long personal relationships for business. The Australian businessmen are generally modest, and they don't like to brag or even talk too much about personal achievements and expect the opponent to be modest as well. During a business meeting, as mentioned before, being on time is very important. Shaking hands before and after meeting is standard. Australians also like facts rather than emotions and feelings in the presentation. Also, maintaining a good eye contact is crucial because Australians think maintaining a good eye contact means that you are being honest and trustworthy. Some Australians may use a little bit of humor during the meetings, but Australians are direct and they will respond to things they like and do not like without hesitation. In terms of negotiation, Australians have little room for bargain and negotiations. The meeting and agreement should be according to the original purpose. If you are holding your meeting in Melbourne or Sydney, you should wear a conservative, dark-colored suits or dresses. If you are in Brisbane and other tropical areas, a shirt and tie with slacks can be formal enough. Australians prefer foreign businessmen to use hello instead of good day because it is too overused by tourists. Also, if you're invited to a barbecue, it is customary to bring a bottle of wine or good beer for the host. If you are invited to a home for a meal, offer to help preparing the meal or cleaning afterwards. Australian men love sports, and oftentimes sports and touristic sites are good topics of social conversation. In Australia, they call evening meal evening tea, and supper is a light meal or snack. Since by now you have learned much more about Australia, let's move to the marketing practice and market opportunities available when a firm starts up a business in Australia. Australia is abundant in diverse resources, attract high levels of foreign investment every year, along with the free trade agreement. The case for entering or expanding in the Australian market is getting easy. With few barriers of entry, a common legal and corporate framework, sophisticated consumer and industrial sectors, English-speaking business culture, and strong Australian dollar, which is stimulating great demand for products and services from other countries. So what kind of sectors would be significant to Australian market exporting from other countries? These are machinery, vehicles, optical and medical instruments, electrical machinery, pharmaceutical products, precious stones, plastics, and chemical products. Although it seems reasonable to enter Australian market, there should be some challenges. First of all, you will have to consider that Australia is distant from the rest of the world, having large land area and relatively small population. This leads to market dominance by a few large firms in certain sectors. Australia is integrated into the world economy and remains a commercial and financial center for the region. Therefore, Australian and other foreign competitors in Australia have some long-established brands with strong reputation and existing supplier relationships. Australian markets is open to Asian and other low-cost producers. Firms must have sufficient added value to overcome the costs of getting the product to market and to compete. But do not think too serious about the challenges. We discovered some market entry strategy for Australia. It includes 3 common elements. 1. Understanding the market. 2. Selecting the optimal partner. And 3. Providing ongoing support to that partner in the market. Now, we will talk about management scene. The 3 key points we need to focus are: employment practices have been developed towards a strategic human resource management approach during the last 40 years. Also, Australian human resource practices are becoming more individualized, calculative, and based on effective practice. And finally, the role of the human resource manager has become more strategical and professional. Human resource management practices are needed to achieve organizational behaviors. Australian HRM was able to successfully use and allocate working hours to suit the business. Increment in HRM increased control of employees. As you can see, Ted tried to explain to his wife why he slept with the secretary. HRM serves to develop policies when there is shortages of labor. HRM uses performance-based payment, and it is widely accepted throughout Australia. Recruitment and performance appraisal became prevalent in 2008 and 2009. Because of the wage increase for those who work really well, basic pay increased dramatically at the individual level for managers, professional and technical, administrative, and manual employees. There was a trend to the individualization of employment policies and a major decline in the recognition and role of trade unions and collective organizations. Performance appraisals and performance-based pay focused on the individual rather than the collective. Australian HRM is becoming more individually calculative. This was reflected in the use of particular HRM policies such as performance appraisals, performance-based rewards, and increasingly flexible working arrangements which would appear to support employer requirements rather than employee needs. Also, the trend of individualism is maybe the reason why Australia is so lucrative for FDI. Let's have a look at Australian management. The average overall management score for Australian manufacturing firms is now 2.98, primarily attributed to the inclusion of smaller-sized manufacturing firms in the analysis. Operations management remains the strongest area in management practices for Australian firms, with an average score of 3.22. Among all the interviewed firms, 10% of the firms have a score above 4.14 with a maximum of 4.84, while only 5% of the firms have a score less than 2, further confirming that a large portion of companies have successfully implemented modern systems and processes in managing their operations in a sustainable way. This graph shows how much labor productivity is important for manufacturing firms. Australia's management scores is not the best in the world, but it is among the top nations and it has high potential when it can achieve better efficiency. Human resource management is not as implemented in Australia as the States. This is due to the collectivist character Australia has, and it is gradually being changed into individualism, and we are expected to see Australian corporates firing employees via SMS in the future when it reaches to the States. Companies which scored more on their management performance review had more managers with university degrees, and it seems education is really important. It is clear that countries with higher managerial performance employ managers with a university degree, while Australia lacks such human resources. This is another factor FDI may help Australia. With better knowledgeable managers, Australians may reverse engineer it and increase their efficiency. Australian M&E is managed pretty well, but not as good as foreign M&Es. Domestic companies scored 2.8, and it shows how foreign companies entering to Australia may harm domestic industry. Australian corporates that sell their stocks to investors are managed much more better than other companies. It is interesting to see that government-managed business scored the lowest, proving their low efficiency. Australian companies who scored 4 in their managerial review owned almost 50% of the national intellectual property, such as patents and licenses. So, is doing business good in Australia? Culturally, there are signs that point the way that it's good. Anyways, finally, let's look at the financial and current market of Australia. It's boring, I know, but hang on. First of all, Australia is listed as members of APEC, G20, OECD, and WTO. Yeah, they are influential organizations, but how? Did you know that Australia's GDP is $1.5 trillion and has the 12th largest national economy by nominal GDP? It contributes 1.7% of the world's economy. I know that 1.7% sounds small, but that is equal to $6.4 trillion. The Australian dollar is their national currency, which $1 Australian dollar is equal to $0.93. Not much different. Australia has 3 major sectors of businesses. The service sector, which is responsible of 68% of the GDP, mining sector, which is responsible for only 10%, and the mining-related economy that is responsible for 9% of the GDP. So, basically, mining and agriculture. For a clearer vision, let's divide the sectors into 2 main parts, industry and services. In the industry sectors, we have resources, manufacturing, and agriculture. In services, finance, tourism, media, education, and logistics. But according to Wikipedia, the main industry is mining, industrial and transportational equipment, food processing, chemicals, and steel. Now, we land upon the most boring part, trade and economic performance. Fun fact, did you know that Australia had the highest GDP per capita in the world in 1870? Discovery and exports of natural resources fueled the economy, but as the population grew, the GDP per capita declined. How about startups? Startups are emerging in Australia, creating growing firms such as Zukao and Flirty, Revolver Creative, and Yatango. Also, there is less competition compared to the United States. Success in the Australian market often requires establishing a local sales presence, this meaning appointing an agent or distributor constantly. Most of the criteria foreign firms use to select agents or distributors are applicable to Australia. The distance from many of their trading partners and the sheer size of the Australian continent causes foreign firms to stress the importance of local support and service. Foreign companies should visit Australia both to meet prospective partners and demonstrate ongoing support. Remember that doing so is the common practice of their competitors. Australia has a number of regulations and laws on marketing, such as Australian Consumer Law, Australia's Companies Law, and Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations. So, make sure that your business is obeying the rules. Overall, is Australia a good place to do business? We say our answer is yes.